Hi everyone, I'm Divya Paridi. I'm part of the core team here at Nivan, and today I'm here with Ji-Sook Yim, who is a product design lead who thinks deeply about where AI fits into the loop in the design process, what it's actually good for, and where human judgment still needs to be in the room. So thank you so much for being here with me today.
Thanks, Divya. I'm so glad to be here.
Of course. So let's jump right in. You describe yourself as someone who navigates ambiguity to solve jigsaw puzzles and UX problems alike. How has AI changed the nature of that puzzle? And does it make the ambiguity easier to sit in, or does it just create new kinds of it?
Yeah, I think the AI has actually added like another layer to the puzzle. So now the puzzle has gotten more pieces and it's now almost like a 3D or even 4D puzzle. So I think traditionally it was ambiguity in terms of, hey, let's now better define the problem space and better understand what our users are trying to do, what their pain points are. But
Mhm.
now there's this added layer of where does AI fit into our workflow
Mhm.
and where are areas that AI can really help us get to a starting point faster, and how can we help, or how can we use AI to help us get to where we need to be in a faster place while still being able to kind of control the output in some shape or form, evaluate it, and figure out how to kind of move forward in a more strategic way from there.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned controlling the output. So kind of in order to build a puzzle, right, you need to have all of the pieces. And so what exactly do you see like the pieces being when you're using AI in the picture?
Yeah, I think depending on kind of what kind of setup you have with your AI toolkit per se. So I actually myself have been trying to catch up with all the new things that AI is able to do, and specifically with Claude that I've been experimenting on my end on my own. You're able to give it skills, so it's kind of like you're building a knowledge base for Claude, where it's always taking that context of knowledge per se, or guidelines or boundaries you're giving it. So every time you are giving a prompt to Claude to do something, it's always taking its output or generating output based on what skill or knowledge base you're giving it. And so I always think that like AI is, it's always a probabilistic experience where no matter if the same person prompts the exact same thing on a different session, different day, that output is always going to be somewhat different. But if you're able to give Claude a kind of a knowledge base to always work off of, you're able to at least somehow control a little bit of that probabilistic output so
Mhm.
that it somehow is going to be made consistent with your design system or consistent with your business context or strategy that is within your project or product.
Right, yeah. One thing, so I've also recently started using Claude, and one thing that I've seen is that it asks a lot of clarifying questions instead of just assuming that it knows best. And that's honestly, I've worked with like a couple different AI tools, and I feel like that's a new one. Whereas the previous tools that I'd used just kind of assumed that what they were saying was law, and people are going to take that as law and assume that what you're saying is correct. But when the tool that you're using is actively understanding that, hey, I'm just a tool and I'm just here to assist you with whatever you're doing, but let me try to understand the problem to the max, that automatically is going to make the output so much better.
Yes, definitely. And I think what's really great with kind of what I found with Claude is, yeah, when you have it in the plan mode, it you can review what it's going to plan to do before you actually get the output. So you have a little bit more kind of way to guide how Claude will execute on what you want it to do.
Absolutely, yeah. And again, it's just so cool to see like how these tools are evolving in real time. We're watching this
Hmm.
actively. It's constantly changing every single day. So I'm sure that there's going to be a new feature probably tomorrow.
Yes.
So, next question is, you lead with curiosity, creativity, and critical thinking as your team's North Star. When AI enters the design process, which of those three do you feel most protective of?
I think at the end of the day, critical thinking is so important because every time you decide how you want to work with Claude in terms of what input do you give it, you have to think about what is helpful for it to know. And then definitely with the output, you have to understand what do you want to do with it, how do you interpret it, or what do you need to do to elevate it or take it to the next level or use it as a starting point. That being said, I think curiosity and creativity, the other two C's, definitely have a point depending on where in the process of your workflow or just even general where you are with just your work process. So,
Right.
for example, with curiosity, I think that's so important to kind of be open to explore and have a foot in the door into what AI is capable of. So being curious means that you're able to be open to explore and be familiar and be exposed to, what is AI able to do and how can it maybe fit into my process or my workflow. So that curiosity is really kind of that first step into kind of opening the door to that AI ecosystem. And then
Mhm.
once you're in that AI ecosystem, being creative in terms of, okay, like definitely the prompting to get an output like design or prompting to get a synthesis of some notes with the key themes and takeaways is kind of a very typical way of how we think of how we can use AI with our work flow. But there's so many other ways in terms of can you figure out how to create synthetic personas, for example, that
Mhm.
can then maybe do some usability testing on your behalf as kind of a very basic starting point. Or how can you be creative in terms of how you feed that knowledge base or context to the AI so it's always kind of pulling from that knowledge every time you want to get an output from it in some shape or perform. And so that creativity is kind of, I think it's where we can figure out how we want to use AI. And because it's such a ever-changing landscape with new things coming up like every other day, I think there's so much room for, there's no like manual on this is the role, how you need to use AI. It's always very like fluid in terms of there's just so many possibilities where I think that creativity can come into play.
Right, absolutely. You mentioned something about synthetic personas, and I feel like that is a concept that could potentially receive some pushback because it's just like it's not actually indicative of, or people could say that it's not indicative of the real users.
Mhm.
How do you navigate that, and what like resources do you use when you are actively prompting the tool to make sure that it's actually um, just properly encapsulating what our users are looking for?
Yeah, admittedly, I haven't actually gotten to practicing it yet.
Okay.
Although I did see how it was demoed to kind of give it a persona of like, this is an older user who maybe is not as familiar with XYZ technology, and this is a younger user who's more familiar. And so that made me think about, if we were to apply that to kind of our team's workflow, maybe we can have ways we can sub-segment some of our key user
Mhm.
groups to get a sense of, maybe we have a very high level flow that we want to get some basic testing out of, and those personas can maybe potentially get super high level usability issues or kind of give us a findings report on kind of how they maybe quote unquote go through the flow. That being said, definitely these are synthetic, right? And I think a lot of it also depends on how you are building that persona, like what kind of context or knowledge, information are you giving it. And I think you can never be done with like, okay, I tested with these synthetic personas and this is my findings, and now I can move on to the next step and like just like not actually evaluate and really think about like what's missing here, what did the synthetic persona potentially do or not do that we need to dig deeper into to be more strategic with like where can we do more research, or is this something that we need to dig deeper into doing a survey to get more volume of directional knowledge of is this truly an assumption, or is this an assumption, or is it something that is truly an issue. And so I think that even if we were to use synthetic personas at the end of the day, it's a starting point, but it's a starting point for us to become more strategic and focused in how we use that output to get to the next step.
Right. No, yeah, that makes sense. And it's like you said, like it's not like the details are being fabricated, right? Like it's rooted in real user research. Like you're taking the data and then that is where you're getting the prompt from in the first place. And so that the way that you prompt it and the way that you input the data and allow the AI tool to see like, okay, here's what we found across our user base. Here's what we need you to do. Like that's of course going to affect how it like outputs, you
Mm-hmm.
know. There is a difference between AI speeding up your process and AI actually making your design better. In your experience, which one is more often true?
I would say right up front, which one is actually outright false, in my opinion. And so I think the second part of AI making design better, I think at the end of the day, AI is a facilitator to get you through a certain step of the workflow. But at the end of the day, it is the human that is taking an output that is probably average, maybe sometimes mediocre, but using the experience as a designer, using our experience around what we know about design best practice, what we know about the context, even maybe what we know about certain personal dynamics within a team, that there is no way a prompt in words can truly reflect that kind of unsaid, kind of human-ish things. And so I think it's that judgment based on historical knowledge and context, knowing the team and what maybe they care about that's sensitive to them that you can necessarily put in a prompt, as well as understanding, the taste of like instinctively we would know the designer what is kind of good design versus not so good design. And so using all of those kind of human judgment, experience, craft, taste to then take that output to the next level. And in terms of AI helping to speed up the process, I want to also caveat that speed doesn't necessarily mean that, okay, AI made something fast and now that work step in the workflow is done. It's more like AI may have gotten a lot of kind of the legwork out of the way that was super manual or tedious for a human to spend time on, but now we're able to kind of delegate that to the AI to do, and now we're taking that output to use as a starting point so that we can use the time that we saved to be more strategic with what we want to do next.
Yes, I love that answer, and I think that that's exactly what the tool should be used for. There's this narrative that AI is going to replace designers because you can technically generate interfaces through AI, but just because you're able to generate it doesn't actually mean that it's good and that it's actually serving the problem that you're trying to solve. And so I like that idea that like AI is just used to get rid of the manual labor, the tedious tasks that we could do, but we don't necessarily have to. But that doesn't mean that we're completely removing the human judgment aspect from it.
Yeah.
Where in the design process do you find AI genuinely earns its seat at the table?
Yeah, I think definitely maybe not a seat at the table where it's sitting next to me in a stakeholder meeting, but I think it generally has a place in helping us with our workflow from discovery to ideation to testing, research. So at every step of the way, there's probably something where we need, for example, when you're in the ideation stage of trying to get breadth of concepts, of explorations, it may take a lot of time or several hours to get a breadth of ideas out there, but with AI, you can prompt it to get a baseline of some breadth of ideas where now you already have a starting point within minutes to then use that output to figure out, okay, how can I dig deeper into these particular concepts and flesh those out more versus, these other things that definitely I know I'm not going to move forward with. And so I think kind of where AI helps with the workflow is kind of how can it help bring a quicker a stepping stone for each step of the workflow so that the output is then used as kind of already a basis for how we want to then take that next level, or kind of inform us on, do we need to do more discovery here or do more research here, or maybe really tweak this part of design here. So I think in that aspect, that's where there's so much potential and possibility of, even with research, maybe there's a high level discovery with AI that you can do to get super, super high level insights. But then based on those insights as a starting point, that can help you figure out where do we want to do even more targeted focused research and create a more targeted interview plan when we actually talk with real users or do a survey to get input from a volume of users, knowing that maybe we have kind of high level themes up front that we can start with.
Okay, that makes sense. In the design thinking process, do you feel like AI can benefit or AI can help more in one stage over the other? Because I heard you mention research a couple times, but I know that AI can also help with prototyping and ideating. So I'm curious, in your experience, which section or part of the design thinking process has AI helped you most with?
Yeah, I think it might depend on kind of where or how much information you have or don't have. And so, for example, with research where I found it very, very helpful up front was I was trying to create some concepts for a product, and we had a list of a few competitors that were on our radar through our conversations. And so it was helpful to get a high level idea of a competitor landscape. And it would have taken me hours and hours to like go into each site, like look through what their experience was, and then compile kind of some key themes. But actually, with Copilot, we were able to use the research agent that was built in, which already kind of was able to provide a very, very extensive document of the key competitors, their strengths and their weaknesses. And so it already within minutes was able to do that research upfront for me and my team to then we were able to use that to know, okay, where within these strengths and weaknesses do we want to dig deeper into to then actually go into the site to learn more versus having to do all of that work up front.
Okay, that makes complete sense. Yeah. Many people interact with complex systems during some of their most stressful life moments. How does that kind of high stakes, emotionally loaded context shape how you think where AI should and shouldn't be making decisions?
I think AI should never be making decisions, especially in a high stakes, stressful situation. But it should be able to help the user feel supported and understood, and also help the user understand what options or things can they consider to be more informed, to become more confident on what they should do with the situation. So, for example, let's say that I was in a very stressful situation regarding whether it's my health, my finances, or my overall well being. I would want to go to a trusted companion, whether it's a very close friend or a family member. And ideally, that person, that trusted companion, would not tell me, well, you should do this, but it would ask me more questions on, like, well, have you considered this? And actually, there's these three sites you can go to learn more to get resources on XYZ. And it would give me guidance and things I should consider to help me become more informed about my situation. But that person would never just say, this is the one thing that you should do, and then I'm going to do it for you. And so I feel like it's very similar in those sorts of situations. How might AI feel more like that trusted companion to guide you in how to navigate the situation versus giving you kind of an answer, quote unquote, answer on what to do?
Mm, yeah. I think that that's an interesting perspective because again, like getting the options from your trusted friend or whatever it is, like those options are what help us like kind of go towards a decision that we want to make. But I do feel like there are a lot of people out there who are solely using AI to make their decisions for them.
Hmm.
And I
Yeah.
think that's where that tension kind of arises because it's just like this is a tool. It can give you options, but it should not be making these life and death situations for you. And as we continue on, like there might be a time where AI is used to like make healthcare decisions, financial decisions, decisions about like the federal like um, prison system, things like that. I think that there is a very big chance that AI is going to be used in those contexts, and I think that more than anything, it should not be making the decisions by itself, but it should be offering options for the human to ultimately make their own decision.
Exactly. Yeah.
Human in the loop has become a bit of a buzzword. What does it actually look like in your team's day-to-day process, not in theory, but in practice?
Yep, I think definitely the most common way we're using AI in our team is typically with Figma Make, where we're trying to get some concepts upfront, or maybe we feel a bit stuck on a particular page and we need some guidance on how we can approach this design. And so anytime we're getting output from Figma Make, it's always thinking about, well, we can never take that as kind of the answer and then run with it and be done. And so it's always thinking about, well, what can I do with this output? And so that human in the loop concept, I think, is literally being in the process with the AI and always, it's almost like quality control where you're thinking about what that output is, thinking about what is it missing or what is it still lacking in terms of the business or product context, or even accessibility. Within Figma Make right now, even if I ask it to consider accessibility guidelines, there's definitely outputs that is completely going to be an accessibility nightmare. And so I have to always keep that in mind. So there's lots of questions to kind of always, I don't want to say challenge the output, but make sure that it's not missing basic accessibility or design guidelines, as well as making sure that the output is maybe inspiring you to think on how to solve the problem, but it's not really the answer to the problem you're solving for.
Yes, I wholeheartedly agree. And that goes right back to the statement that you made about how critical thinking is so important in this process. And this is where critical thinking kind of comes into play. Just because it's giving you an output does not mean that you take it blindly. You have to ask those questions. Is this actually serving the business needs? Is it actually serving the people that we're trying to serve? And yeah, like that just makes complete sense. Um, as a design lead, how do you help your team develop their own judgment about when to trust an output and when to push back on it? How are you able to help them strike the balance between the slower questioning process and the fast-moving pace of AI?
So I am super fortunate that I don't have to do much to to develop my team's judgment on that. I think we all understand that exactly what you said. We cannot take that output blindly and call it a day. And so I think my team and myself, we always think about, it's almost like trust and verify and evaluate. And so, okay, trust that the AI kind of at a very basic level understood what we're trying to do, and it's giving us some ideas to work off of. And now let's verify to make sure that key things aren't missing from design principles, accessibility, and business requirements and needs. And then evaluate, okay, with this output, what should I do next? What do I need to do next? Like, what does this output mean? And from a design perspective, it might mean that, okay, I have some ideas now to spark what I can actually do, like hands-on with taking that design to next level. From a research perspective, if I maybe had a list of notes that I fed into the AI to give me high-level themes, now I can use those themes to figure, okay, I have a starting point now, and where can I maybe dig deeper to validate that these themes aren't oversimplified or some of the nuance isn't necessarily missing. And I think that friction of quote unquote friction of slow and deliberate and taking the time to verify, taking the time to evaluate is super important, because that's part of that quality assurance and having that human in the loop to make sure that you're able to make sure that the output isn't just used willy-nilly, and you're really using it as a starting point to help you be more informed on what to do next.
Yeah. Do you have any concerns about like security when you're feeding in user data and like user notes? What are your thoughts and feelings around that?
I think with our company's AI tools, it is supposed to already be secure within our company's ecosystem. So I would trust that that is in place. And then when I'm experimenting with AI tools outside of work on my own personal time, I do make sure that it's not going to be things that are like personal information and is generic. So that's kind of how I try to navigate that. But I know there are probably larger conversations about security, privacy in general, especially around like the health space, things like that, financial space. But I am not as knowledgeable on that topic to speak at length.
Fair. I just wanted to hear your opinion on it.
Yeah.
Okay. You mentor designers through ADP List and South by Southwest. Are you seeing a shift in what aspiring designers think they need to learn now that AI tools are everywhere? What do you tell them?
Yeah, I think definitely there's now a shift from, hey, can you provide me feedback on my portfolio to, how do I show that I am an AI designer or I'm familiar with AI through my work? And I want to help differentiate to them. First off, there's a difference between designing for AI versus designing with AI. And I want to make sure that they're clear on that so they can also clarify that when they're presenting whatever case study that they have around an uh, AI knowledgeable designer. So
Mhm.
I always like to kind of guide them into when you're thinking about designing for AI, it means that you are designing for an experience where the user has to interact with some kind of AI interface or AI generated output of some sort. So that means that you have to think about what are the design principles that you think about to build trust and transparency throughout that entire process. So that is a little bit different than designing with AI, which is how do you use AI as part of your workflow to find ways to make your workflow more efficient, find ways where AI can help you with your process. And those two things maybe could be in this one case study where you're designing for an AI product and you have AI helping you throughout that workflow. But it's very, I think, important to differentiate are you designing with AI or for AI? Because those are slightly different ways of thinking in terms of process versus kind of product. And
Mhm.
I always then get the follow up of like, oh, there's so much out there. And a lot of times, if the mentee isn't in a position where they're able to just get AI product work on their plate, I always tell them that, first of all, it's a very difficult job field. So the more you can show initiative to show that you're doing projects outside of your day to day, that's going to say a lot. And especially with today's ever changing field with AI, the more you can show that you're experimentative, you're trying out new things, just be able to show that in your portfolio. And I always kind of guide them into like, what are you personally interested in? Because if it's a passion project, then you're going to be probably more engaged or inclined to want to really take that from end to end. So is there a passion project that you can think about in terms of a product that you want to maybe conceptualize? Or maybe in your personal day-to-day life, there's something that's very, very tedious that you want to make more efficient and kind of use that as your case study to figure out how you can show your AI skills, whether it's through workflow or through product design thinking into your case study. The other questions I usually get now are like, how do I keep up with all of this AI news out there? And a lot of overwhelm. And how I kind of guide my mentees on that is first, if I say, well, you're not alone because I too feel overwhelmed. It is completely impossible for anyone to be an expert in everything at the speed and pace in which AI is just constantly something new is coming up, or someone has a different way of using AI than someone did yesterday. And so I first let them know like it's okay to feel that way, and you don't have to feel like you need to know every single thing and have to feel like you have to be on top. Like nobody will be able to do that. That being said, just know enough to be exposed and be familiar. And if you find something like a piece of a video or an article that you feel is super interesting for you or you want to know more, then use that to like dig deeper into kind of a deep dive. And that can be kind of a natural way where you build your own knowledge based on kind of what interests you or what you want to learn more about. And hopefully that can kind of help make you feel less overwhelmed. And sometimes, honestly, it's just watching maybe a very general overview video about something with AI on YouTube, and then take something, a nugget from that to be like, okay, well, now I want to know more about this small piece, and then use that as kind of your next like intro into that particular topic. And then I know Anthropic also has an academy, free academy for courses around their AI tools. So although it's specific to Anthropic, it's also like maybe a good primer for people to just get the baseline knowledge and then use that as a jumping point to, okay, now what do I want to learn next, given kind of the basic 101 I have here.
Mhm. Yeah, the overwhelm is so real. Like I think there's just so many tools that are out there, and then that coupled with the fear mongering that like AI is going to replace UX altogether, and that there's not going to be a space for designers. It's a scary time to be a junior in this space. It's a scary time to be a designer in this space. I think
Anyone, anyone, yeah.
all designers across the board, regardless if you're a junior or a senior level practitioner. But again, I think that your words were really comforting in the fact that it's no, we're not alone. Everyone is in this together. We're all navigating this technological shift together. And the only thing that you can, instead of trying to become a master in all of them, just choose one or two. Choose one that interests you. Get good at that one, and then you can continue to learn. That's all this is about. Like, we just need some time to learn these tools. I have a question, a follow up. Is
Yeah.
there anything that you miss about the pre AI era, while like in the design field? Because I'm assuming you were a designer pre AI too, correct? Yeah. So, what is there, if anything, is there anything that you miss about it?
I miss I miss the not feeling overwhelmed part. So
Yeah.
I think like now on top of trying to navigate like my workload with my projects, outside of work, I'm trying to think like how can I still stay relevant, and especially as a lead, how can I learn things myself so then I can help to guide my own team at work. So I feel like there's a little bit more pressure on me to uh, be even more experimenting and learning, because it's not just, well, it is for me, but it's also in my role as a lead. I also have to help show my teammates, here's some examples of what I found that worked to also inspire them. There definitely are designers on my team who have kind of are super just inclined to just go and run with it. So I think that's also great where they can also be a point of contact for designers who want to learn more on kind of what they've done. And so that's just been great to have kind of that community of support and collaboration. But I think honestly, it's just I miss not having to think about this extra puzzle layer on top of everything.
Yes.
Because yeah, I think too, like with your talk about the anxiety of the evolving impact of AI on our role, I definitely don't think that it's going to replace ever any designer, but I do think it may impact how we design. And so, like for example, with when I mentioned the creativity part earlier of like how to use AI within your process and workflow, maybe now a traditional or maybe a future designer role in the design space, product design space, isn't necessarily just creating designs and concepts and then prototyping, but it's maybe more of how do you orchestrate the AI so that you can help kind of give boundaries or guidelines of how it's going to execute. So I can maybe foresee, but maybe future will tell me I'm wrong, but I can foresee potentially the designer role evolving into more of an orchestrator and kind of
Mhm.
helping the AI know how to execute,
Right.
versus just being a designer who like strategizes and then executes on design, purely on the design part.
Right. Yeah, and that's like there's a whole space like evolving with prompt engineering, learning how to properly prompt AI, and that's probably something that we as designers are going to have to incorporate into our own portfolios too. Like, okay, like let me show you my thought process and why my prompts are yielding the best outcome.
Hmm.
That's such an interesting perspective that we're going to become more of orchestrators. That kind of makes me a little sad to think about too, because I mean, like I do like the hands-on component of all of it, but
Yeah.
that's ever going to fully go away. But I do agree. I do think that there is going to be a time where we become more of like the overseers. Um, okay, what's a moment where leaning on AI actually led you somewhere creatively that you wouldn't have gone on your own? And conversely, a moment where it led you somewhere you had to course correct from.
Yeah, so I was exploring a personal project on my end. So, side note, I am a huge Swatch watch fan, and so I love Swatch watches ever since I was 12. And so I was thinking of an app where you could capture a photo of a Swatch watch, and the app would give you information on like what model is it, when was it released, and some fun facts about it.
So I'm
And
sorry to cut you off. What is a Swatch watch?
it's a brand. watch brand from Switzerland, and initially I was super interested because their designs are super fun and playful. And when I was 12, I was like, oh, like this watch design is so different from any other standard watch design out there. And so, yeah, the past few decades, I've been just here and there collecting. So I have a small swatch collection at home.
Awesome.
Yeah. So
Awesome.
yeah, so based on my personal interest for Swatch watches, I partnered with Claude to figure out how can I make this like watch a Swatch ID app concept. And yeah, it was actually interesting because as it was asking me clarifying questions, it also asked me, hey, do you also want to have a way for people to find similar watches, and it also gave me ideas of like how rare it is, and where you can maybe buy it online on like other third-party sellers. And these were things that I initially like didn't even think about. And hindsight, I'm thinking maybe Claude is making me have like a feature factory and it's giving me future bloat on my project. But it was kind of a way to be like, oh, like that's actually something I never thought about. So it gave me more kind of venues of where this app could possibly go. The other thing that I liked too was it actually asked me up front, like, oh, if somebody scans a photo of a watch that's not a swatch or a non-watch, what kind of error message do you want it to show? And so it already proactively made me think about that, because to be honest, completely honest, I usually don't think about like those error edge cases up front when I design, because usually it's a happy path that I prioritize. So it was really great that it like already asked me that stuff up front. And then it kind of gave me a caveat, like, because Swatch is a brand, like we can't make your app like branded, so it has to be generic, like a watch ID finder. So yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, the output it gave me was, I mean, it was okay. It was a little bit too busy, but I was like, oh, this is a starting point, and it gave me some idea that I hadn't thought about. So I think in that aspect, I was like, oh, this is interesting to kind of bounce off ideas with AI. On the flip side, though, I was designing for a very complex administrative tool for work, and I had a very complex set of input fields that I was feeling stuck on. So I asked Figma, make like, here's the user goal, and this is all the criteria for what this input field needs to do. Give me some options to explore. And out of like the 6 or 8 options it gave me, like none of them really made sense, or it was like over engineering, or it was just completely unaccessibly nightmare of like how many clicks you had to do something. And I was thinking I had like an initial idea up front, but I felt like I could have just stuck with that one idea and like save my time like prompting and reprompting. And so sometimes when you have an instinct, sometimes that instinct is really what is maybe the direction you go with, and AI might give you a little detour, but at least you know like what maybe was possible that's not a good idea. So if you have a conversation with your team and they're like, have you thought about this, you can kind of be like, actually yes, and here's maybe why it didn't work. But that was an instance where I was kind of going in a circle, and I thought, okay, I just need to like stop with the AI stuff and just do what I thought was the initial idea.
Yeah. Because sometimes, I mean, it can make it easier, it can make it faster, and it can help. But there are other times where it's just like you get so caught up in that, like you said, the loop of like, okay, you're not doing this right. Can you do it again? Can you do it again? And then you have to wait for it to generate something else. Hope you got this wrong. This would be faster if I just did it myself. If I just like did it all myself. But then we think, because again, it's been taught to us that like this is supposed to make your life easier. It's supposed to be more efficient. It's going to be faster. It's going to do all of it for you. But no, like it's not. I completely relate. That makes complete sense. Yep. Okay. In 5 years, what's the design skill you think will matter most? The one that AI simply can't replicate or replace?
I think it's that critical thinking, human judgment in terms of problem solving, because at the end of the day, no matter how many prompts you give the AI, the output, it's never going to be perfect as is. There's always going to be something that needs the human touch. And I kind of think about it in terms of, maybe it's not a one-to-one analogy, but like with music, there's so many like songs that are AI generated that you hear vocals, you hear instruments being played. And on first hear, not first glance, but on first hear, it sounds fine. It's like, oh wow, like that actually sounds like someone actually sang it, someone actually played the instruments on there. But then when you kind of take a step back, it kind of there's no soul to it. There's no like
Yes.
human emotion, and especially when it comes to like music, sometimes that imperfection of like a voice maybe slightly cracking, or like when someone's playing an instrument, they maybe just kind of a little bit of it's not exactly on rhythm. There's a little bit of that emotional part that makes it real, and I think there's not really necessarily like a one-to-one with design on kind of what does imperfection mean in a digital design space, but I
Right.
think it's kind of like there's this human instinct in terms of like as a designer you have a sense of you can't exactly explain why, but you have an instinct on this is good design and this is not good design, and it's that instinctual part, it's like gut feeling that AI can't ever get to unless maybe in 1 year there's a chip in your brain that can read your mind. But at least in the near term, like I think that like gut instinct that you can't actually have a reason for describing what or why you feel that way. I
Mhm.
think that is that human aspect of it that I think is maybe even beyond the judgment piece, beyond the critical thinking piece that like AI can never ever replace. And I think that's what's going to take a design that's very generic to not only great but also differentiated and unique. Like when I think about all the AI generated designs that I've seen so far with just Claude design, it has this signature Claude design aspect with like the cream background with like the accent words emphasized in like a dark orange italicized text, right? And I'm just like, that is definitely by Claude. And so it's like you kind of need to have a bit of not only like the design experience to know like how to make it not look like that anymore, but it's
Yeah.
also the taste part to know how do you make it a little bit more unique. And I think like AI can't get like that instinct and taste because it's not human.
It's not human. Yeah, it's an algorithm, and I think that human touch is what makes designs memorable.
Mhm.
And the comparison that you made to music, like that, I wholeheartedly agree. I think that when you hear an AI song, it sounds too perfect.
Yes, yeah.
It sounds just I can tell, like I'm like, this is it's good. Like I'll listen to it, but I'm not connecting to it. And
Yeah.
that same concept applies to our designs too. You want humans to feel connected. You want them to feel seen. And AI can't see them. AI is just it's a tool. It's a computer program. But yeah, no, I agree with that completely. Okay, this is my last question for you. What would you say is the ideal relationship between a designer and their AI tools?
I think that you want to think of your AI not just as a tool, but maybe as an extension of you. Maybe like your little AI intern. And depending on how technology is popular one day and out the next day, maybe you have interns that are there for a quarter or a summer, but maybe you have interns who become a contract to hire and are full-time junior employees, but it's always an extension of you. And so I think of kind of, how can you accept and acknowledge that like AI is here, like there's no way of going about it. Yes, you can, it's fair to have some skepticism and concerns, but you can't just resist it and say, I'm never going to use it. So how can you figure out how can you work with this AI intern? How can you maybe understand what skills you can give it? How can you know how to delegate quote unquote work to that AI intern, but then be able to use that work to evaluate their work, review their work to do what you need to do next. And then as that AI intern grows its knowledge, as technology evolves, your AI intern will also have more skills than it did last year or even last month. So how do you proactively learn how to adapt in working with your AI intern? And I think the more you get exposed and familiar with the possibilities of AI, you're able to then better, quote unquote, work with your AI intern because now you're capable of knowing, or you're able to know what AI is capable of and what that intern is now capable of. And then you're able to better adapt and be proactive versus, not being in the know of AI and then even 6 months later being like, I have all this stuff that I need to catch up to and I have no idea, how to utilize it. So I always kind of think about, I think that to embrace it. That being said too, this is something that I'm actually trying to learn more about is how might we also understand the environmental impact of AI. I think it's great that we're all using it for our personal use for efficiency or creativity, and definitely at work. Definitely, though, there is an impact to the environment in terms of every time you prompt it. There's energy usage.
Right.
There's also impact in terms of how much water it's using up, and there's definitely it's nothing is ever free, and so something I'm wanting to also learn more about is what does that impact actually look like, what does that mean, and are there ways that we can be more mindful in terms of how we're using AI while still finding ways it makes sense for us in our lives, personal and professional, but also being cognizant that every time we use it there is an environmental impact of some shape or form.
Yeah. Those those were both really powerful. I think AI intern is going to stick with me for the rest of my life. Every time I use Claude, I'm going to be like, "You are my intern. I'm going to tell you what to do." I love that. That was really amazing. You gave such valuable takeaways. Thank you so much for joining me today. This was
Thank
such a
you.
conversation and important, and I've learned so much from you, which was amazing. And I'm so grateful that we got to sit down and do this.
Yeah, thank you. This was so much fun. So thanks so much for having me.
Of course.